Hey guys, this is Richard at reefs.com. Thank you for joining me for this video. Today is actually very exciting because I'm here in Plant City to visit ACI Aquaculture, to visit my good friend Chris Meckley and his lovely bride Amanda that's sitting right over there. How you doing, Chris?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
Good. It's always
good to have you back, man.
Likewise, likewise.
Been too long.
Far too long. Now, what are we doing for the first video of 2025 between reefs.com and ACI collaboration?
Well, we've been working on so many different things, and where to begin is always the hardest thing for me to figure out. And
right.
I'm glad you and Amanda talked about it and narrowed it down to two. There's so much going on here all the time.
Right.
We're going to talk about kind of a breakthrough, the way I see it, as a natural form of phosphate removal. It's PNS Bacteria by hydrospace.
PNS is found in nature. You know, it's one of the oldest living bacteria,
Yep.
right? And I'm surprised that it took you this long to get into it. How this method has helped you so far?
Well, I've been working with Kenneth since I met him at the studio when Jake was still alive.
Okay.
And we didn't really get hooked up good until after he did pass away.
Okay.
And we talked and talked and talked, and then we finally got together. He wasn't producing enough of the Rhodopseudomonas purple non-sulfur, the Rhodopseudomonas polyester.
Yeah.
I think is how it's spelled or pronounced. I'm sure somebody will correct me here that I'm wrong.
I'm an Asian guy, so pronunciation and these big words, they escape me. I'm sorry.
So it's we've been working with Kenneth and Orlando Salser.
Yep, a good guy.
He's the one that said, we got to get Chris this stuff,
right?
So he can do. He's got a big enough facility that we can actually get some real good data from what I'm able to do. And one of the things that I had been talking to Ken about was, my biggest system issue is the receiving soft coral system from the wild.
Okay.
And because they come in and they're in such rough shape that whenever it breaks down, it creates a ton of phosphates and also creates nitrates.
Right.
And I don't like using chemicals. I don't like using.
You've been always more towards natural choices.
I just don't like what the possibilities are of the unknowns of adding too many chemicals to a system that is closed.
Yeah.
And nature does it on its own.
Right.
So why the hell can't we do it on our own? And I've always been trying to find other ways, and I've never been able to find one. I used lanthanum chloride for
many years.
Decade and a half, 2 decades to get phosphates from being really elevated, because a lot of people don't realize that if your phosphates are above like 1 part per million, you're not going to get any coralline algae growth. You're going to stunt your calcification. You're not going to get good coral growth. It doesn't mean it's not going to grow your corals, but it's just not going to be where it needs to be.
Right.
And then you're going to have problems with all that phosphate being stuck inside of your substrate, inside your sand, and any of the pores and crevices that are in the egg crate. We use the big fiberglass thick grating, and that's porous. It's going to get stuck into there. And as you're getting it under control, you're just going to be adding more and more and more of these chemicals. Right. Well, what is that going to do to your corals? And on our scale, I can't afford to have the possibilities of lanthanum buildup, or you can use aluminum oxide that'll remove phosphates, that'll also put aluminum in your water.
Right.
And aluminum toxicity is something that creeps up on people and they have no idea that they have it.
Yep.
Granular ferrous oxide is another great way to remove phosphates, and I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff because I've got too much to lose, and hobbyists really have too much to lose too. So, people look at this particular method and way of doing it, and they say, well, it's going to cost more money to do this. Okay, well, what's going to cost more money? Dead corals or putting this product in your water that's natural, that is going to feed your corals? It's going to just overall health of your system is going to be better because you're putting a naturally occurring organism in your system that wouldn't naturally be there just by having a reef system itself.
Right.
So
because you have to somehow introduce it, especially in a closed system.
Exactly. So, and the problem with it being introduced once, it's not going to be there in the levels it needs to be there to do the job it needs to do. So adding it on a daily basis, it can get to the pocketbook. But I also look at the price of corals. I look at the price of lights. I look at the price of everything we're doing. You can put lanthanum in your tank, and it will do exactly the same thing, but buildup of lanthanum in your system can affect your wrasses. It can really affect zibrosomas. I've seen me being me, just putting the whole amount in. When we're talking about a system our size, I'm putting 200 mLs of lanthanum in, and that's the conservative dose. I used to put 400 in all at once just to get it down from 1 part per million down to zero point 0.2, where I was satisfied, and then again. By the end of the week, or even a few days later, it was already crept back up to the 1 part per million mark, and I had to add it again because it's just a problem with a soft coral receiving system. When you're taking corals out and putting corals in on a weekly basis that are imported, that's a big problem. Yeah. And I did everything. I was doing algae scrubbers, and thank God for the algae scrubbers. I solved the phosphate issues on the majority of my systems with algae scrubbers. Yeah. But on this system, I have 2 on this 1,600 gallon system.
Really?
I have a commercial. And I have a 300, which is the clear water scrubbers versions of them.
The largest version of that, before going commercial, right?
Commercial is
the 2 of 300s.
2 300s, and then he made when Josh was doing it, he made a beast, which was 4 of them, and we learned as we got the phosphates under control that even the commercial is too big for a 2,500 gallon system when you have things dialed in. So all we ended up doing, instead of running the lights 24/7 on them, we just run them for 12 hours a day. I'm actually back to, because I'm feeding so heavy, I'm back to running 24 hours a day, and I keep my phosphates, got 0.1 up to 0.3, and people are like, oh, you can't do that, that's too high. No, it's not. If every system's different, and if you know your lighting, you know your flow, you know your animals, a 0.2, 0.3 phosphate is not an issue at all. If you have super intense high lighting, that's a major problem. You're going to turn acros brown in a heartbeat. But when you have a lower light setup like we do, because we keep SPS, LPS, all in the same system, and that's an art. I don't recommend everybody do that. It's actually, I second guess myself sometimes with it, especially after hurricanes. But it got to the point where doing water changes and adding lanthanum on a regular, I just wasn't good enough. And Kenneth finally in Orlando got to the point where they're like, we're going to send you a cube, and it still wasn't enough to dose the way we're supposed to. Right. We're supposed to put 1,700 mLs of this in here, and a cube is 20,000 mLs. Divide that by 30 days, what's it come out to? It's like 650 mils a day was what we were dosing, and it worked. It was actually really doing a good job. We went from doing the lanthanum dosing twice a week to keep them below that 1 part per million. We started doing dosing about once every 3 weeks. And then I was like, well, we keep going over on the cube because we're doing 650, but we're not always dosing it on Saturdays and Sundays. So I then took it by, eliminating the weekends, and we started putting 800 mils a day in. And now we're dosing lanthanum maybe once a month. So ideally, what I'm going to probably start doing, and I'm going to talk to Ken about it out here at Reef Stock in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go and see if I'm going to purchase a cube and have them still send the cube, and then really get real hard data of the dosage that Kenneth put into play that need to be dosed in your system. So of course we're dealing with 1,600 gallon system here, guys. So it's a whole different ball game for you guys. You're not going to be using nearly the kind of volume that I'm using here at ACI on a commercial scale, but you'll be able to use the data that we're able to produce to give to you guys and scale it down. And if it's 10 times less in volume, you divide up what we're doing, and you'll be able to get a good dosage, and you will be able to control your phosphates. I'm a firm believer in it. Taras is doing a whole article on it. The graphs look freaking crazy because you see the spikes. You see a slow spike going up, and then you see this huge drop going down, and there's the drops when we put lanthanum in the system. And I have data all the way from before we were using PNS all the way to today, now using the 800 mils 5 days a week. So it's a really, I think it's a good breakthrough, because if you are investing your hard-earned money into expensive corals, as they are today, and expensive systems, it's no different than all these, high-end gear and everything. Skimp on the high-end gear and budget for using the PNS, and stop using, you know, the aluminum oxide and the granular ferrous oxide, GFO. You're going to get, there's benefits from all of them.
Right.
You know, I'm not trying to knock any of the products at all, but when you're a geek like me that doesn't like using chemicals, you know, you're going to have no worry about your alkalinity being dropped from putting GFO in your system, and you're not going to have to worry about the aluminum spike you're going to get over time by using aluminum oxide.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there is, for me, worth its weight in gold, because you're going to spend the money somehow, way or another. When you think you're saving money on a reef tank, you're being either lied to, or you're just not thinking ahead. And with all the thinking I've had to do with what we do in here and how to save money and how to do things as efficiently as possible without wasting money, and that's what every reefer needs to look at. Right. If you're going to buy a $1,000 light for over your tank, well, you can go with other means to light your tank up properly, save that money, and use it on PNS, so you're not using. Bottom line, there's so many ways to do this. If you're going to spend the money on something, you're going to spend it anyhow to take care of problems, and skimping on what you're doing because, oh, it's cheaper to use the aluminum oxide than it is to use the PNS. Oh, it's cheaper to use granular ferrous oxide than it is to use the PNS. The problems that you can get from those other two will be gone by using the Rhodopseudomonas Plaus, whatever the heck it is, the purple non-sulfur. Yes. I'm horrible with Latin names, always have been. I think it took Kenneth a dozen chats to even get Rhodopseudomonas in my brain. And there's so many species of Rhodopseudomonas out there. It's one particular one that you want to use. So I don't know. I mean, I think when Taras gets his article out there, that's going to really open people's eyes to natural means of removing phosphates, because we're putting them in there by either food or animals dying and them not being found in the system. There's so many ways you can get phosphates in your system. What I'm getting at, digressing as I always do, and you get this Rhodopseudomonas bacteria does live in that rock. It actually lives in coral tissue. And it can be cultured. How Kenneth does it exactly, I don't know. Yeah. I don't care to know. All I know is he does it, and it's for him, because how his wife lets him do it with the smell of sulfur in his daggone house all the time is beyond me. Because I know when we open that bottle up, it's like, okay, they just dumped the Rhodopseudomonas in the tank. It smells like rotten eggs. But it's a great thing for anybody that has. And it's not just great for the phosphate aspect of it. You know, the fact that it actually naturally removes the phosphates from your system is a huge bonus. Yeah. But it does so much more. We don't bring in a ton of NPS corals, non-photosynthetic corals, but I can tell you for a fact that we used to have major issues if we didn't move the non-photosynthetic corals out within a 2-3 week period of time. And that used to bother me. So I really tried to push my suppliers from Indonesia to be very limited on the amount of
NPS corals.
If they needed to send me quantities of them, okay, 5 of this species, 5 of that species, that way I had a better chance of moving them all. But now I'm just like, send them, you know, because we put in Rhodopseudomonas in there every day. The polyp extension on the corals is phenomenal. Echinogorgia, Menuella, Acanthogorgia, and Euplexoria are probably our most popular NPS gorgonians that we sell. And I have some out there that have been out there since before Christmas, and they're fully polyped out and they look spectacular. The bright yellow sea rods, the purple sea rods, the orange sea rods. They're the Menelia. Again, I'm not great with pronouncing these Latin names, but
if Jake was here, he would laugh at you.
Oh, he'd be laughing his ass off.
Because he was laughing at me before.
But you know, there's nobody taking over what Jake used to bust my balls about all the time, and this whole calling a head of Euophilia, it's a polyp, folks. I correct everybody all day, every day, and Salem is kind of taking over Jake's role.
Okay.
And he calls me up, dude. He's like, this thing's got like 7 heads on it. He's like, got polyps on it, dude. He's like, damn you, Meckley. I'm like, I'm never gonna stop saying it until you start saying polyps. I said, talk to all your friends and all the other people in the industry about them and call them heads all you want, but they're polyps.
Right.
A head of coral is multiple polyps.
Right.
That's fact. But the hobby has gotten so far away from it that it's hard to get them to reel them back in, guys. Talk scientifically. Right. But that's other thing about. I know I could go into a tangent there too, but I'm not going to. After having a nice chat with Kenneth and Orlando and all these people out at Restock in a couple of weeks, we're going to start investing our money into the PNS as well, and utilize it so we can get true hard data of what Kenneth recommends to put into the system, and see after a year of doing this, do I ever add lanthanum back to the system ever again? And if I don't ever have to add it back, it's a game changer for the hobby. I mean, because I know Kenneth makes a reactor that you can culture the stuff, but you have to replenish the culture every so often because it only, it's complicated. When you're talking about a bacteria that loves and thrives 110, 120 degree water, and then we're putting them in 76 to 80 degree water, how long is that bacteria population going to thrive and grow?
Well, but also it's good. I think, just like any other bacteria, I imagine, even if it dies or whatever, it doesn't just stay in your system, but protein skimmer will suck it back up.
Of course.
And take it all out.
Of course.
So
I'm 100%.
You don't have to worry about, first corals will eat it, and whatever that's waste and that's coming through your filtration, then your skimmer will pick it up. So I don't think that we don't have to worry about too much about nutrient issues. So if people were to get into this for the first time, and then if they're ditching, let's say, aluminum oxide or GFO or anything like that, how would you recommend about going about this?
I would just recommend you just start off by using the exact dose that's stated on the bottle that Kenneth has put out there.
So stop the GFO completely first and then do it, or do it slowly, do it the recommended dosage plus the GFO and slowly wean everything out.
I think, because we didn't use any of that stuff because I refused to, and I was just using lanthanum. So if you're using, aluminum oxide and the GFO, it's not going to hurt you to leave the aluminum oxide and the GFO in there, but when you're testing your phosphates, if they keep dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping because you have aluminum oxide or ferrous oxide in there, you want to just eliminate it completely. But I don't think, from what we've seen, I don't think you need to leave any of it in the system. I think you just remove it completely and start doing a daily dose on your system. And honestly, the best way to do it would be to put it on a dosing pump. So if you have a 100-gallon system and it requires you to put in 10 mLs a day, put this stuff on a dosing pump and have it dosing, 10 mLs a day. The only thing that would be problematic with you dosing it off a dosing pump would be the fact that because it'd be sitting in a stagnant, it'd be stagnant.
Bottle,
it will settle because I make sure that when Devin does our dosing every day, that she takes the box, it's a cube like this big, and she just rocks it back and forth so that it's not concentrated at the bottom of the box. And we're making sure that we're getting an even amount going into the system. So the only thing that would be kind of cool, you could get one of those little, what do they call it? The chem stirrers that has a little magnetic stirrer inside of it, and have it stirring nonstop to keep that bacteria in suspension. And ideally, we noticed this one little thing. In the wintertime, it settles quicker
because it's cold.
Yes, and in the summertime, we leave the cubes, they're always outside. So when the cubes are like 90 degrees, we don't notice that it gets as concentrated at the bottom of it seems to me like it thrives and does better, like Kenneth told me, it does way better at a higher temperature. So we thought about it, if we ever put a reactor on our system, that we would be, 1,700 mils would be dosed every day, and that would be done by a dosing pump. So we'd have a feed line that goes into the reactor. And that draws water in and replaces what we're taking out, and then have feed the culture to keep it going. How that's going to work, I can't wait to find out, but it's going to be really interesting because I'll just heat that water up to 120 degrees and let it thrive, and 1,700 mils in a 1,600-gallon tank. At 110 is not going to raise the temperature.
Honestly, I was thinking, and it really kind of like it's right now, it's spinning in my brain right now, right? Because you mentioned reactor, right? And because I was thinking, man, it was like, if I have to, keep buying the bacteria. Like eventually, like it's gonna add up, right?
Of course.
And then I was like, man, but that's gonna make it expensive. However, if there is a simple way to grow this, like you mentioned in a reactor, and I was like thinking because we come in contact with so many different equipment during the trade shows and whatnot. I seen like a acrylic reactor for, let's say, from like a Geo's, and they had reef bright lights like on the side. Those lights, even it's LED, it still heats up,
of course,
the acrylic inside and the water. And so I'm thinking like if we could have something like that and just have it, like a dosing pump, like you said, and just dose the amount that's needed, and just replenish whatever that's needed.
And then bacterial culture continues to grow inside and replenishes that clean water with more bacteria and saturates it again.
Right.
That's exactly what the concept is with what Kenneth was talking about.
Simplify this and then have it incorporated into the hobby. I think that could be a game changer, because then A, you don't have to keep buying the culture of bacteria. B, you don't have to buy GFO as much, because those are all consumables.
As this evolves as a way of taking care of these things, I'm sure Kenneth's going to come up with something that's going to make it more viable and not as expensive. But again, you spend it somewhere.
Right.
It's either going to be on GFO or aluminum oxide, and I know GFO ain't cheap.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can't tell you what the price of the PNS bacteria is off the top of my head. I know that their first test run, they sent me a 500 ml bottle. I'm like, I can't even do one dose. And that's when Kenneth's like, let me get my marble straight, let me get this rolling, let me get my production up and be able to, get my feet wet, with the whole thing when everything is launched properly. And then once he got things going, that he just produces enough that we can get it here. Just to touch base back on what I already talked about, what we found from the very beginning was that it kept our phosphates from rising as quickly, even with a 1/3 dose in the beginning.
Right.
And it made me happy because I was less stress on my tangs and my rashes in the system from putting lanthanum in as frequently. And when we bumped it up to about half dose, and we noticed that we were putting lanthanum in once a month versus like every 3 weeks, that made a world of difference. And anybody using this that doesn't see these results, it means there's so much phosphates in your rock and substrate that it's going to take a little longer for it to actually show you results, and you have to be patient with it. There's never a quick fix to anything in this hobby.
Especially in the hobby, right? Right.
And if you think it's going to be a quick fix, why are you in the hobby? Sorry. Patience and observation are probably the most overlooked thing in this hobby, and it's the reason why people are in and out in a year and a half, and it makes my heart hurt that so many people are in and out in a year and a half when they should be in it for the long term.
Right.
And it should be something that isn't a money pit for you, and spending all the money on all this stuff, you got to pick and choose what you spend your money on, in my opinion. And natural ways of taking care of your water quality are way better than spending money on the most expensive light and the best light that's supposedly on the market.
I agree. I mean, I think what we're aiming to do is replicate Mother Nature.
Exactly.
And going nature's way, I think it is the best way to go. I mean, that's what we're trying, right?
Exactly. And the most expensive LED doesn't replicate Mother Nature. Sorry, I had to say
that guy. Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending time with us. I always enjoy coming here. A, because you have so many beautiful corals. B, you're just mountain of knowledge that I just love to just consume everything, because I always learn something new. And I appreciate you taking your time to talk to us once again and sharing all your experiences, because I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, you have nothing to gain from this.
No.
But we're sharing this knowledge to better the hobby.
To better the hobby. It's what it's all about.
I really appreciate that, and I like this. We're doing this again and now because this is our way of getting back to the hobby.
Sounds good. Just keep doing it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much, Chris, and you guys have a great day. Take care, guys.
Take care.
I'm done the video.
Yeah, right.
Which one are we doing?
I'll do the PNS first.
Penis first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Penis?
Yeah, he said it like
said
that
the
too.
penis
I heard
first.
that too. I heard the same thing.
You know, Chris, I understand.
I was like, I'm gonna step up.
There's a condition for this. It's called Floridian slip.
There you go.